Hello again, it's Pastor Wagner. Welcome to my video blog. This morning I want to talk about why the church should not be incorporated, or why local churches should not be incorporated with the state. And my base text that I'm going to use today is Matthew 22. I'm going to read verses 16 through 22, and then I'm going to get into some comments here. In Matthew 22 and verse 16, the context is some of the Pharisees were trying to catch and entangle Jesus in his talk. So they were going to ask him a craftily worded question to see if they could catch him in his answer and have some reason to accuse him. And we read there in Matthew 22 and verse 16, "And they sent out unto him their disciples with the Herodians, saying, Master, we know that thou art true, and teachest the way of God in truth, neither carest thou for any man, for thou regardest not the person of men. Tell us therefore, what thinkest thou? Is it lawful to give tribute unto Caesar, or no? But Jesus perceived their wickedness, and said, Why tempt ye me, ye hypocrites? Show me the tribute money. And they brought unto him a penny. And he saith unto them, Whose is this image and superscription? They say unto him, Caesar's. Then saith he unto them, Render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. When they had heard these words, they marveled, and left him, and went their way." So first of all, we can see just from the primary focus of this text was about paying taxes. They asked Jesus, is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? And Jesus said very plainly, yeah. Look, whose picture's on this money? They said, Caesar's. All right. Caesar's picture's on the money. It's Caesar's money. You render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and you render unto God the things that are God's. And so we can take from that we as Christians and people in general, citizens, ought to pay taxes to the government. Now, as to how much tax we ought to pay and what type of taxes and whether the income tax is constitutional or not, or all those philosophical arguments, that's another story. But the fact is, we ought to pay tax of some kind in some way to the government. That is a scriptural position. But what I want to take from this text is you see how Jesus said to render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. Jesus makes a clear separation here between the things that are God's and the things that are Caesar's, or the things that are God's and the things that are the state's. There's a clear distinction to be made here. And this text should be very important to churches when it comes to incorporating themselves with the state. See, back in the 1950s, there was a part added to the IRS tax code, and the section was called 501c3, and what that did was allow churches and charitable organizations to be made non-profit corporations of the state. And I'm not going to get into the history of all that and what all that entails, but when you hear somebody say that a church is a 501c3, they mean that it is a non-profit corporation. They've signed on the dotted line for the state. And a lot of people these days, a lot of liberals especially, talk about the separation of church and state, and they think that church and state ought to be separated, and I agree. But what they generally mean is that the church and religion should be kept out of society, and it should be kept out of government. But when I say that I agree with the separation of church and state, I'm not really talking about that. I'm talking about not how religion should be kept out of government, but how government should be kept out of religion. If you read the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, I have it pulled up here on my computer, it says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So the First Amendment says that Congress shouldn't make any law that establishes a religion or prohibits the free exercise thereof. In other words, Congress, the U.S. government, the state should stay out of religion. They should have no say in it whatsoever. There should be no laws regarding religion, and the state should be out of it entirely. Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. There's only one head of the church, and that's the Lord Jesus Christ. We read that in Ephesians 5, we read that in Ephesians 1, that Jesus is the head of the church. The state should not be the head of the church. We had that under Catholic Europe for a long time, where the state, or where the church controlled the state, and the church and the state were basically one. That shouldn't be. There should be no state church. And it goes with 501c3 corporations as well. Whenever a church signs on the dotted line and it makes itself a creature of the state by becoming a 501c3 nonprofit corporation, they have agreed to abide by state policy, by public policy. So if the state says it's public policy that homosexuals ought to be married, and they say, therefore, as a creature of the state and as a minister of the state with a state license, you therefore will marry homosexuals because that is public policy, and to not do so is to go against public policy, and we will revoke your 501c3 corporation status. Well, the problem is churches nowadays, virtually all of them, our church, the Minneapolis church, is not a 501c3. There are other churches out there that are not, but virtually all churches nowadays are 501c3. And what they do is they trick you, or maybe not trick you, but they sucker you into the 501c3 because of the tax breaks. Because the church is now tax-free, all your contributions to the church are tax-free, and they get you in it. But as one man said, let me see if I can remember the quote, with the shekels come the shackles. With the money, with the tax-free money, come the shackles. Okay? You're going to make yourself into you're going to bring yourself into bondage because now you have to abide by state public policy, whatever that may be, and you are limited on what you can preach. You can't preach politics. Churches have gotten in trouble for that in the last few years. Preaching politics, telling people who to vote for, all that kind of thing. So anyway, with the shekels come the shackles. But Jesus said here, and he's very clear, render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and to God and unto God the things that are God's. God, our religion, Christianity, the church is God's. It doesn't belong under the state. So we don't render unto the state that. We don't give the state, we don't let that camel's nose get under the tent. Just keep the state out of the church and we'll be just fine. You know, good fences make good neighbors. Keep the state out of the church, keep the church out of the state, and we'll do just fine. And I think all Christians need to recognize this very principle that Jesus taught. And the problem is that if you've signed on the dotted line, eventually you are going to have to choose whether you're going to obey Caesar or you're going to obey God. And if you decide to obey God, it's going to cost you financially, but it's worth it. So anyway, that's just a brief review of 501c3 corporations and why churches should not be them. The church only has one head, and that's the Lord Jesus Christ. So I'll talk to you next week. Thanks for listening again.